The time is 11:02 p.m., or 11:02 a.m., excuse me. We have the presence of a quorum, and this special meeting has been duly called, and notice of the meeting has been posted for the time and manner required by law. First on our agenda is going to be public comment. Do we have anyone here that would like to make public comment? All right. Seeing none. Next, or before we get started, I'd like to take roll call. If I'm going to call your name, trustees, and if you could just please say here so that we know who is with us today. Myself and Mrs. Addie Helliger is here. Do we have Mr. Dave Rosenthal?
Here.
Do we have Mrs. Kristen Tossan?
Yes, I'm here.
Mrs. Grail James?
Yes, I'm here.
Mr. Jim Rice?
Here.
Mrs. Allison Drew?
Here.
All right, we're all here. And if you could, please state your name before you make a comment today so we know who is speaking. So next on our agenda is our discussion, 3A. We are to discuss district social distancing procedures during the COVID-19 pandemic. Dr. Dupree.
Thank you, Mr. President. Trustees on the phone, if you would not mind muting your phones when you're not speaking, that would be beneficial to those of us here in the room. So one of the most important things I wanted to update the board on today is, as everyone is well aware, yesterday we issued a video and public communication that ISD will be suspending instruction in our schools for the next 2 weeks. At this point, that is based on the fact that we have many in our international community that have been on spring break for the last week, and we know that many have traveled internationally during that break. We have also had now confirmed cases of community spread of the COVID-19 in Fort Bend County, and we are also aware through our tight alignment with the local health officials that there are connections in our community to other cases throughout the region. So we felt like it was in the best interest to enact a very robust social distancing program in our district, which means we're asking everybody to stay home, is really what that means. Now, for students, it means that for the next week, we are not going to be asking them to do anything, and probably for the next 2 weeks, we're going to ask them to stay home and get ready for what is to come following the 2 weeks. We're hopeful that we'll be able to resume classes after those 2 weeks. But we also know it's very possible that we could have extended break and further extended break for another weeks or months, even to the end of the school year. We're preparing for that. So with staff, what this looks like is we're going to have essential staff in district working. Many will be working remotely. We're trying to really honor social distancing in every way. So even those who are expected to come to work are going to be advised to remain appropriate distances from the others in the workplace, use email, use phone calling, and to do things to really minimize direct interaction when at all possible. So we're really working hard. We're also asking staff to make sure that if they have even potentially been exposed in any way to the COVID-19 virus, that they stay home and self-quarantine. The board today is going to look at compensation for staff, about how to handle that for the coming weeks during this school closure. But the bottom line is we're asking everyone to stay in place. We're even asking our parents to please follow guidance we're getting from the federal and state and regional, local, and health officials, because it's just critical that we all help to put a stop to this outbreak and help to slow it down by separating from others. Many have asked why Fort Bend ISD chose to close for 2 weeks instead of 1, as was announced by other districts. We did that in collaboration with our local health officials, because with so many students and families returning from spring break, the incubation period is 14 days. So a 1-week closure does not accomplish our goal of being able to determine how widespread any outbreak might be in our local community. So we believed it was best to ask everyone to stay home, maintain social distancing for at least 2 weeks so we can get a better grasp on what the realities are in our community. So that is my primary update. I'm open to take any questions the board might have about kind of where we are and where we're going on this.
All right, we're going to start with our questions or comments, and I'm going to go ahead and start with Mrs. Helliger because she's here. Mrs. Helliger, and I'll call on the rest of you in just 1 second.
All right, thank you. Dr. Bree, I really appreciate the video that you sent out. It was very informative. I think it kind of gave our community the knowledge they need around planning for the kids as they're coming back from spring break. I received a few questions that I wanted to share with you. Lots of questions, and you mentioned this in the video, but a lot of questions around how we are going to work with our most fragile community group around replacing their lunches and the meals that they really count on. I know you said that we're working on a plan. Do you have any updates on that plan?
Yes, ma'am, I do. Thank you for asking. So actually, by around 1 to 2 p.m. today, we'll be announcing the plan around that. We're identifying 8 to 10 campuses strategically located throughout the district. And I think it's important to know that the program will be available to any Fort Bend ISD student, not just those who qualify for free and reduced lunch. We're going to have drive-by service for breakfast and lunch beginning Monday. And again, details will be out this very, we'll be publishing an announcement about that this afternoon with specific campuses, specific times. Our goal is to be able to provide at least one hot meal a day for students. We may not be able to achieve that based on availability of food because there are many constraints right now. Other districts are in high demand as we are with the same suppliers, but we're committed to beginning Monday morning, providing breakfast and lunch each day for our students on a drive-by pickup basis.
That's good to know. I think that will put a lot of our community at ease around our plan to still support our students. Along that same line, our community wants to know how can they support us during this process? Is there opportunity for them to help? One thing about our community is that we rally with each other together to deal with these types of crises, and so there's a big need or an ask of how can they help.
So we've actually, as a district, as a leadership team, we talked about that this morning in our huddle phone call. There's nothing that we need for the community members really to provide the district directly at this time. I think we've got our contracts in place for cleaning supplies. We have people who are going to be working, who have the job to do so many important things. But what we're finding, I'm sure you've heard some of the same concern, is this is where our community has to rally together. Because there are going to be many parents who have to work and their children are going to need someone to take care of them. And so I don't know that we don't have the system to manage that, but certainly we're hoping that local faith-based organizations, nonprofits, and frankly just neighbors will help and reach out to help care for the children in our community when they need it, and offer that support to other parents who have a need, and figure out ways to do childcare swaps and things. And as food becomes a necessary issue in our community, if the grocery stores are unable to get stocked, we're going to have to come together in a lot of ways with the nonprofits. But I think just neighbor to neighbor offering support is one of the most important things that we're going to need to do in our community right now.
Okay, thank you. Those are the questions I have right now, Jason. I'll yield the floor to the other members who come in.
Thank you, Ms. Helliger. Next, Mrs. Grail James, I wanted to start with you. Do you have any questions or comments?
Yeah, this is Grail James. I have a question, Dr. Dupree, around communication, and I know you guys have put out video. I agree, it was very good, very informative. But I'm still seeing on social media and even in some email messaging I'm getting people being confused or not clear on the plan. Maybe they didn't watch the whole video, I'm not sure. But how are we making sure everybody gets the message, and even those who may not be connected to the internet, things like that?
Well, that's always a challenge, as you know, and we're really trying to follow the rule of 7, communicated 7 times in 7 different ways. And that just broke, our major communication came through yesterday. So we are continuing to use, I mean, most of them honestly in this situation are going to be internet-based, either through email and various social media platforms and video platforms. So we do believe the word is getting out. And of course, we're going to have signage at each of our schools on the front doors so that if anybody doesn't know when they show up for school Monday, they'll be able to know, they'll have a direct visual sign as to what is happening and to guide them to make a phone call or to the internet, something like that as well.
Okay, so we're gonna use our marquees and signs on the building,
Yes, ma'am,
and
absolutely.
that,
Yes.
okay,
Yeah.
and also, okay, and then, I assume that, and you might have said the news media as well to get the message out.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, we're publishing everything through all of that. We actually have several folks from the media in the room right now. So we are absolutely leveraging every way to get the word out. I did an interview with the Chronicle this morning as well. So it is getting out through various means.
Okay, and do we have an internal messaging system anymore that goes through people, through text message to people's phones for parents?
Yes, we do. That's the Blackboard system, and we push everything through that system as well.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
And then my second question is a little bit longer or broader thinking, and that, if we don't have school for 2 weeks, that's an impact to our funding, as I understand it, and I wonder if you've had any conversations with the state, or if the state's given any indication about funding and how they will support the ISDs as we make our local decisions.
Yes, I was actually on a call yesterday with other superintendents in this region, with the Commissioner of Education. And during the call, the guidance he gave us was that we should, if and when we close, we should use first any bad weather days we have built into the calendar, any available minutes we have available in the calendar, and then after that, they would be working with us as they have with other catastrophic events such as Hurricane Harvey regarding any waivers. But the other guidance they gave was that we'll need to also track at some point any absences and any lost time due to COVID-19, and that he said they're going to figure out a way to make sure we do not lose funding related to that event. So there were no specifics provided, but he did indicate that they're on top of that and that they're planning to have a system in place again, as they did with Harvey, to make sure we're held harmless on our funding, even if we miss school for an extended period.
Okay, thank you. Well, that's good news, and I'm glad that they're thinking ahead on that, because if we are having extended absences for students, either because they are self-quarantining or their families, or because of outbreak in our community, then we will need relief. So thank you.
Yeah, the specific guidance he gave on the absence piece, because, closure, of course, as you know, is different than the absentee piece, that he did give us the guidance that if we have absences that are directly related to the virus, that we need to track those separately, and that they would be counted as in attendance for funding purposes.
Okay, so that'll be another big communication piece that we'll have to
Yes,
figure out how to manage.
exactly. That would be a couple
Okay.
weeks down the road, yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Well, thank you for your hard work and all of this. Those are my questions for now.
Thank you, Mrs. James. Mrs. Tolsan, did you have any questions or comments?
Yes, this is Kristen Tofsan. Thank you, Mr. Burdine. I appreciate it. So first and foremost, I want to let Dr. Dupree and the administration know how much we appreciate your hard work. You guys did not get a spring break. You worked over spring break in order to ensure the health and safety of our students and staff, and I appreciate that, and I think the entire board does. And you've been very diligent in getting communications out that are not just timely, but that are thorough, which is always important, because we don't want to jump the gun and get information out there that we then have to change. So I appreciate that, and just wanted to say that up front. I missed the very end of what Mrs. James was asking because my call dropped and I had to call back in. But with regard to the funding, I'm really glad to hear that, that TEA is talking about a hold harmless. I hope that our governor and lieutenant governor and our legislators are listening because particularly in our area, I think we have the potential to be the hardest hit as community spread starts. And I think that we are committed to keeping our students and staff safe for as long as possible. And as the largest employer in Fort Bend County, I think it's critically important that we lead the way on this. So I'm glad to hear that they're thinking we're going to be held harmless, and I certainly hope that that comes to fruition, and anything we can do to help and support that, just let me know. I'm happy to do whatever is needed for our community for that. Some questions I have, so I guess my other question did you have any conversations about the state mandated STAR testing? Are there any thoughts on that yet? I know some of that starts in April, which honestly isn't that far away. And, I think we need to prepare as we prepare to go to online learning, we need to prepare for that to be a reality, which means that, there's no way to do STAR testing. So was that part of the conversation, Charlie?
It was, but there was no commitment or he did not really address accountability or testing. I think at this point, they're trying to get a little further down the road to see what happens during spring breaks and after spring breaks throughout the state. But as of now, I think the earliest exam is supposed to be given on April 7th. And it's my understanding from my last engagement with TEA is that at this point, they're planning to do that. I will tell you the commissioner is going to begin today 3 p.m. calls every day with superintendents in the state. So I do expect, and again, as you know, this is a very dynamic situation, shifting not just daily, but multiple times a day. So, as a leader of this district, I've had to say, we may come to a point where we say we're not taking the test, honestly, if we think our kids are not ready.
Right.
And so we may have to have some hard conversations about that in the future. But for right now, I think we're taking it one day at a time, but they have given no indication that they're going to pull back on the testing calendar yet.
Okay, well, I appreciate that, and I think we would, at least I know I would wholeheartedly support that. I think it's going to be a strain right now, even right now as it is with our kids missing 2 weeks of school, which is 2 weeks of instruction, and then trying to prepare for a test that's really the next week, just about. So that's why I'm thinking about it and concerned about it. They will almost be going back to school if they went back to school in the third week, right when STAR testing is supposed to begin. So I appreciate you staying on top of that, and I'm glad he's doing daily calls, and hopefully we'll get an answer on that sooner rather than later. My other question is, I appreciate you guys being willing to serve meals, especially to those who need them. It has been a concern. Are we taking extra precautions in the food service area? I know you said we were going to encourage distancing for our employees who will be coming back. Are we taking extra precautions in the kitchen to ensure that there's no contamination and no spread and that type of thing?
Yes, as you are aware, our food service operation already has a very high degree of high standard for cleanliness, and they're just continuing that with an even higher attentiveness to it, basically. So everything you would expect, the hand washing, the nets, the masks, everything, they're being very cautious in our kitchens. So I do think we'll be able to protect our children in that way while we're still feeding them. And you didn't ask this question, but I did in response to Ms. Helliger's question. I wanted to come back and add another piece about the food service. I said it's available to any of our students. I want to clarify and make sure you understand food service will be available to any child in our community. What I've learned through our calls with other superintendents, which included charter schools, is that many of them are not equipped to serve their students the meals like we are. So any child in our community can come to one of the centers in Fort Bend ISD and receive food. So it does not have to be only Fort Bend ISD students. It could be any child that is 18 years old or younger.
Okay, well, thank you for that. That's good information, and I'm happy that we're able to support our community in that way. Is there a way for our collaborative communities department to help support? You were talking about churches stepping up and daycare stepping up for childcare and those types of things that parents and families have need for. Is there a way for have we thought about our collaborative communities perhaps supporting in that way? I know we already have a lot of contacts and partnerships in place. How can we leverage those for that department to support our families?
Well, at this point, the conversations we've had is we want to definitely support the communication of opportunities that are taking place by pushing that through our website and social media. But we've also had the conversation that we just simply do not have the staff in that division or the systems to really be the conduit for coordinating all of that. I think there's going to have to be some other organizations that step into that role to be we have lots of nonprofits that I believe can, and some churches that can coordinate a lot of that, and we can be a partner with them to communicate broadly using our networks. But I don't think that we're in a position to be the convener and the coordinator of those programs.
Okay, well, I think communication will probably be key, and if we have not posted a list of our community partners, perhaps that would be helpful for people to know who to contact, who have supported our families and our schools in the past. Might be a helpful way for them to at least know who they might can call.
Yes.
And then my last question is about distance learning or internet instruction. I'm very glad that Fort Bend ISD, I'm glad that this board and our administration had the forethought a couple of years ago to get Schoology up and running and get our curriculum on Schoology, which is going to be, I think, critically important in helping us transition to online learning. And I know that other districts are not in a similar position. So I think that that's going to be a big help to our students. Can you just give us a little bit of information about what you guys will be doing, how long you think it will take, and just any details that you have at this point, if any?
Yes.
For distance learning.
Absolutely. So actually, about 2 weeks before spring break began, we convened a task force to actually start tackling this and all the other issues related to potential school closure. So we've been working on this for some time. The heartbeat of it is going to be in our curriculum and instruction department and their efforts to build the systems and structures to really take the online learning outside of the classroom, which is essentially taken, right now Schoology, which is our learning management system, is a tool that's used every day by most all of our teachers and many students and parents, but it has not been used to scale to deliver instruction in an independent way. So I do think, we're going to be able to continue some form of learning for our students. And we talked about this with the commissioner. He fully understood the position the districts across the state are in, and acknowledging that there's districts that are ahead of us, but we are ahead of many, many districts in regard to our ability to provide some form of learning for students. In addition to the online learning, though, back to what Mrs. James was referencing earlier, there are many students who may need hard copy packets. They may need something other than a digitally based learning environment. So we're preparing that as a parallel track. At the same time, we're engaging different vendors who are offering very special offers right now for free internet services to homes who may not have it, devices that we can procure and distribute to students for internet who need to do that, who will need that. So that's part of the work we're going to be doing in the next couple of weeks. I think, to me, though, we're going to be announcing much more of that in the next, not this coming week, but the following week. But the conversation we're continuing to have, though, is we're trying to look long-term and set up a system that would last for an extended period, if necessary. But in doing that, I think the most important thing, one of the most important things we have to do is manage our expectations. Because we have not done online learning to full scale ever. I can't think of a Texas district that has. And so we're gonna have to go into this, our staff, our parents, and our community, about what this will really look like and the true impact we can have. My greatest concern is that we will be able to have kids reading and learning and doing things, but because of the vast diversity in our district, we're going to exacerbate equity problems through online learning, and they will be exacerbated because we have some families in this community that their parents can continue online at home with what we provide, and the kids will thrive and grow. We have other children in our community who do not have that resource, that asset. And so that's very real for us. And so no matter what, we're going to have to be in a position to truly work to close gaps if the minute kids come back in, whether it be in 2 weeks, 4 weeks, or at the beginning of next school year. So we're going to have to really use our resources to assess where students are and close gaps that could result from this school closure, whether it's 2 weeks or through the end of this year.
Yeah, so thank you for that. That's one of my biggest concerns as well. I sort of wrote the question down. How will we let students know they can get laptops and internet if they don't have laptops and internet?
Mm-hmm.
So, and how can we have kids learning who don't have laptops and internet if they don't have laptops and internet? So, I mean, it that kind of begs that question, and it's a big concern of mine as well. I know we have a lot of kids who not only don't have the technical or technological resources, but also don't have the resources at home or the support at home to help them get set up and get ready to learn remotely in that way. And so that equity factor is a big concern of mine as well. So thank you for thinking through it. I also appreciate the sort of forethought of getting this set up for this to go longer term, and then potentially for us to be able to do this in the future as the need arises, whether it's an emergency need such as this, or I know we've spoken in the past about ways to relieve overcrowding in the context of Ridgepoint and other schools. This kind of thing could prove beneficial if we get it right and have a long-term approach. So I appreciate that, and thank you for giving us the update, and thanks to the administration for all the hard work.
Absolutely. I do, Ms. Tassan, want to tie into something you said, because that is the other conversation we're having organizationally right now, is sometimes you do a lot of innovative things in the fire. And so we are looking, we believe that we will learn some things through the next few weeks that we may change how we do business long term, and how we offer some programs and things like you mentioned, some innovative learning practices that may be able to take us very far very quickly that we would not have gotten to for some time were not this situation upon us. So we want to learn through each of these experiences and grow and make our organization better each step of the way.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Tossan. Mr. Rosenthal, did you have a question or comment?
Yes, I did. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great. This is Dave Rosenthal. So actually, Charles, that's exactly what I was going to ask about. One of my questions was about managing expectations. So I'm really glad you brought that up, because my concern is that I think we may have a lot of parents and whatnot that, may expect that teachers may be lecturing online, every day almost as normal, but, that capability is probably pretty difficult for a district this large. So I appreciate that, that you mentioned about, expectations and communicating those expectations. So I think that will go a long way. And so I also agree with what Kristen just said, that, we may find, out of all this, we may find solutions to other issues that we've needed to have solutions for. When things like, long-term subs and whatnot, when we need to do some type of maybe distance learning or things like that. So hopefully this will yield some good things as well. But that's in the future. The other question I had is right off the bat, you said something about compensation, and I didn't quite catch what you heard or what you said. So I wanted to see if you could repeat what you said about our employees and compensation.
Yes, so currently in policy DEA local, the board has delegated the superintendent the authority to pay staff who are idled, is the term that's in policy, who are not working but are idled during an emergency shutdown. And so that authority lasts for 1 week, so it allows me to pay staff for a week. So actually on our agenda for this meeting today is considering the authority for me to go ahead and authorize staff to be paid for the full extent of any closure related to the COVID-19 virus. So that would take board action to pay staff beyond 1 week.
Okay, and so once action is taken, then you will be communicating that.
Absolutely, because that is all, and I was thankful that Mr. Burdine asked me to put that on the agenda today, because that is always the biggest issue for staff. They immediately begin to fear and have concern about their long-term
I've gotten a
pay.
couple of, right.
Yeah, so I'll actually be releasing, pending any board action today, I'll be sending a communication out this afternoon.
Okay, that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rosenthal. Is there anyone else on the line that would like to make a comment or do you have a question? Please speak up.
Yes, this is Jim Rice.
Mr. Rice?
So, Dr. Dupree, I've got 3 questions. One, how are we going to conduct board meetings going forward?
So we actually have that on the agenda as well, because we have a meeting scheduled for March 23rd, and we want to talk about that's going to be our next topic. We want the board to discuss that, because we do believe realistically we may have to do a few more meetings like this under the circumstances. We can talk about that more on the next agenda item in more detail.
All right. Second question, if I heard you say that possibly we would be out of school till the end of the school year, if that proves to be the case, what is the thought regarding high school graduations?
I'm going to be honest, I have not given that a thought yet, other than to say, given the virus begins to dissipate, we're going to have to figure out a way to graduate our children. We do have a contract already in place, and we have all those arrangements in place. So we may be graduating students that did not finish their last 6 weeks. We may have to finish out a way to kind of close out their time with us. But I expect we will have some graduation either as scheduled or at some point in the future beyond that, again, based on the current conditions and status of the virus at that time.
All right. And then my last question revolves around the teacher compensation, and I think what I heard you say is the Commissioner of Education has said first use up all your inclement weather days and minutes and so forth, and then it's unclear as to whether the state would honor additional funding. So I would like to know what the impact to our fund balance would be if, unfortunately, we had to remain closed for the balance of this school year.
I will have Mr. Gwynn, he's not in the room, but I will have him calculate that, and we'll be prepared to share that with the board in the very near future.
All right. Thank you. Those are all my questions.
Thank you, Mr. Rice. Mrs. Allison Drew, do you have any questions or comments?
Yes, hi, this is Allison Drew. I want to first also thank Dr. Dupree and the admin for staff for the detailed communication and video that was sent out, and most importantly for taking the route of keeping students, staff, and community safe. My question is around event cancellation, and specifically UIL, and whether you have any information on that and what we can expect.
Yes, ma'am. So at this point, UIL has given no specific guidance about their events. What we have done, as you will recall from yesterday's communication, is after school, any kind of activities have been canceled except for varsity UIL. But I learned just this morning that most other districts also canceled UIL varsity events. So basically, at this point, for at least the next 7 days, all activities are canceled, even varsity UIL activities. And so we're pending additional guidance from UIL. We expect we might resume varsity play on the 23rd that week, but that's going to depend on what happens in other school districts, because right now most other districts in the region close for only 1 week or on spring break. So that puts us in the position we'll have that information later in the coming week to be able to communicate.
Thank you. That was the only additional question that I had.
Thank you. Thank you, Mrs. Drew. Was there anyone else that had a question at this time or a comment?
Yeah, I had one other question today, Rosenthal again.
Go ahead, sir.
As far as the surrounding districts go, which ones, can you tell us which ones that you know of have canceled school for at least a week or more?
It's a very long list at this point. So, and I honestly don't have them all committed. Veronica, do you have some information on that? I'm asking Veronica Sofer to come to the microphone so she's got a little more information perhaps.
I mean, are there any of the ones immediately around us that have, but maybe that's an easier question to ask.
At this point, it looks like most of the districts have announced around us, surrounding Fort Bend ISD, have announced at least a 1-week closure. I just verified on the Houston ISD webpage, they did announce an extension. I believe their last days in their closure is March 30th. So Fort Worth ISD, Houston ISD, and Fort Bend ISD, to my understanding, are the largest districts in the state that have announced a 2-week closure.
Because Katy,
Okay.
Lamar, they've all done 1 week
The
at
1
this
week.
point.
Some of them are on spring break the following week, and so I think they intend to make announcements as they go through the process.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Anyone else on the line that'd like to make a comment or have a question? All right,
This is Grail.
go ahead, Mrs. James.
Sorry, I just would like to make one more comment, just to reiterate. Dr. Dupree, I really appreciate, and we all appreciate your leadership and the leadership of your administration through this situation. And I would just like to say that you're, everybody giving up their spring break and working over the break to come up with a plan and being able to implement it essentially in such a short amount of time, I think is very commendable, and I'd like to just mention that. And I also want to recognize that as a priority, the safety of our staff, the safety of our students, and then really ultimately the safety of our community as as we think about the concept of social distancing. I really commend you for taking the lead and leadership in that effort. I also want to recognize that this is a very dynamic situation, and it's continuing to change and evolve. Information is continuing to change and evolve, and so, as I said at the very outset, I feel like communication is going to be really, really important. And so I appreciate the efforts you've made so far, and will continue to make in communicating to our community what to expect and how we will help them as a school district and as an entity in Fort Bend County. And so I think that's going to be a critical piece to the upcoming weeks. I also will just pick up on one thing that Mrs. Topham said, and that is let's watch for that community partner that's willing to step up and lead this, or help us lead this community collaboration effort. Because this board has said many times that's a key to our success as a community, and certainly to surround our students and families with care is is very powerful, and really for some of them, it will be very needed at this time. So just hope we'll remain open to looking for that community partner that says that they'll step up and help us to coordinate, whether it's childcare swaps or instructional support or whatever it might be. I see that there's an opportunity there. So that's my comment.
I appreciate that. I am going to tie in just because I'm going to tell you the executive leadership team has done a remarkable job this week. They have had late night and early morning calls and spent hours and hours and hours leading their teams. So I appreciate the board's acknowledging all of their hard work and effort this week.
All right, before we move along, I just have one really quick, simple question, but I've received this question from several community members. As easy as this may sound, but are there any definitions or what you could say rules of the road when it comes to what exactly is social distancing? I mean, I think it may be obvious in some ways, but I'm not sure that everyone really understands what that looks like and how we exist in this community, because we all have to exist in the community, but there are precautions that we need to take. Is there any governmental organization or is there any resources out there that are best practices in regards to social distancing?
Yes, and actually our website has quite a few links to resources, because the bottom line is it means you maintain sufficient distance from others, that you're not in a proximity to have a spread of the virus between people. And it is respiratory, so it's not, I'm not a physician, so I'm not going to get into the details. I'm going to let you go to the websites. There, Amanda, do you have something to add? Amanda Bubel, our Director of External Communications.
So in conversations with the county,
Is that on?
testing.
Is it button on top?
Now it's on. So in conversations, the public health messaging has been 6 feet is really that piece of whatever we're in precautionary measures. This is something that is spread by droplets that are secretions and droplets and such. So sneezing, about 6 feet is considered to be a safe distance from others whenever we're out in the public and in the community. So I hope that helps.
Thank you very much. And as Dr. Dupree stated, it is available on our website for those to go and look, and that was really the point of that comment. So once again, thank you, Dr. Dupree, to you and your staff. This is a moving target. It changes every minute, and it's not easy, and we appreciate your time and your dedication. There was lots of good conversation that was had amongst the board members today, and I appreciate your questions and comments, and we don't need to review all of those. So thank you again. We're going to move along to our next agenda item, 3B. Let's discuss the date and time of our next regular board meeting to consider action on items reviewed on March 2nd, 2020 board workshop and agenda review. Before we get started with this, I would like to say that our board counsel, Rick Morris, is sitting here on the dais with us today, who is going to, I would like to actually have him start by making a quick comment about this. So traditionally, when we call an emergency meeting, we have to have a quorum, and we can only approve items that are due to emergencies. So I want to get some clear, say, rules of the road, for lack of better terms, on what this may look like and what we can or can't do when it comes to our next meeting here. Mr. Morris.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Mr. President. Trustees, I just want to share with you that you're convening for the first time that I can recall under a section of the Open Meetings Act that permits you to meet with less than a quorum in personal attendance in the boardroom and by telephone conference. As this crisis unfolds, we may find circumstances where all local governmental entities rely on emergency meetings so that we can further avoid community spread of the virus through social distancing. So one of the things that I want to share with you is today, since you're dealing with an emergency meeting, you can only address items on the agenda that relate to the purpose of the meeting, which is the emergency of addressing COVID-19. For future meetings, however, to conduct regular business, you still may want to consider convening not by emergency, but still by telephone conference, or where you're able to assemble a full quorum in the boardroom, then you could do as you have done in the past, have specific board members in less than a quorum who are unable to attend, they can participate by video conference. And with that stated, I would be glad to answer general questions. If there are more specific questions that are reserved for closed session, we'll be convening in closed session, and I can provide specific legal advice in closed session.
Thank you, Mr. Morris. I'm going to start with any questions or comments about this, and Mrs. Helliger has raised her flag, so to speak. So, Mrs. Helliger, do you have something to say or have a question?
Yeah, I just want to make sure it's clear, because according to the agenda, it says that we can discuss the date and time of the next meeting. So are you saying that at this time you're asking us to discuss when we would do our next regularly scheduled board meeting, and in what format we would like to have that? Is that correct?
I think that's absolutely right. I think that we wanted to provide an option, and I'll direct this to Dr. Dupree, if the board felt that there was a need for another emergency meeting in advance of the regular meeting, that could be discussed. And as you separately pointed out, we could also discuss the format of the regular meeting.
So, if I'm correct, we have a scheduled board meeting for regular scheduled business for the activities that were on March 3rd, scheduled for, I think it's the 23rd. So my thought around that will be that we would continue with the 23rd meeting, but have it available in this exact same format that we were conducting our meeting today, for the board members and the public.
I think that's correct. I mean, we want to be able to honor those who choose not to be here or can't be here, whatever the case may be. So I would propose that we continue as scheduled for the 23rd, Monday the 23rd, at a regular scheduled time in this format. And in the meantime, if there is a need that we have to have an emergency meeting of some sort, we can call the emergency meeting and do what we're doing now.
Yeah.
So as this may change daily or every minute or every hour, we just don't know what the future may hold in the next coming week. So with that being said,
Mr. Burdine,
yes, ma'am.
can I ask a question?
Please,
Sorry, can I ask a question about that?
please.
I'm fine with that, but let me ask a question to Mr. Morris. So, if we're all social distancing, or we have something come up in the community where our county leadership or state leadership asks us to not convene in groups, how does that work with us being a public meeting that's open to the public, number one? And then do we have to have a quorum present, or can we have, can we all be calling in or participating by video conference?
So I think that there are two parts to the question. One is how will a change in the meeting format affect members of the public who would like to attend your meetings? And then second is how will it affect the governance operations of the board? And let me address the latter part first. Just like you are doing today, you can meet by telephonic conference if there is an ongoing emergency, and I think, or a public necessity, and I think we've met that threshold. And so, as of today, the only trustees who are present in today's meeting are Ms. Haliger and your board president, Mr. Burdine. So we would propose to do the same thing at future meetings for the purpose of promoting social distancing. The way that could work is you do not need to have a presence of a quorum here at the meeting like you would through video conferencing with a telephonic conference. You actually don't have to have any trustees present here. It can all be done by telephone. The only other requirement, though, is that, and this goes to the first part of your question, is that a telephone speaker needs to be available in the boardroom for members of the public who want to attend. That's a requirement of the law. Should the governor issue an emergency declaration in furtherance of social distancing? Perhaps perhaps, I'd have to look at the issue, but perhaps the governor could suspend that requirement, but until such time that we have that suspension, we have to make the telephonic calls available to the public.
Okay, so that answers my question. So we can go forward with our meeting next week, and depending on the situation, either do it by teleconference or be present in the boardroom. And then we'll just have to see from week to week what the situation allows.
Yes, ma'am. Did anyone else have any questions or comments at this time?
Yeah, this is Kristen Toffan. I had the same question that Mrs. James had, so I do want to be sure that we provide a way, not just for the community to attend, but engage, and perhaps we, Rick, if the governor declares a state of emergency, and as you research this, perhaps we should be thinking about ways that allow the community to engage with us. They can always send emails, but perhaps we need to think about ways to alter audience items such that they can submit them via email, and if they have something that they want read into the record, or I don't know, I just want to be sure that we're thinking about how to continue allowing the audience to make their sort of public statements, especially if we have to, not engage in meetings the way we normally do with groups of people together. But I sort of expect us to kind of go down that path. So if you guys would just keep that in mind and maybe make some suggestions to us. I'm in agreement with what Addie and Jason have said, and I do believe we need to keep in mind that we may need another emergency meeting next week, if nothing else, than to provide an update and allow the trustees to ask questions as you guys progress, Charles, with distance learning and meals and other things.
Thank you, Mrs. Tossan. Mr. Morris was going to make a comment about that.
I just wanted to say, as the situation evolves, we'll continue to explore options in the event of a declaration of emergency that would allow some type of form of electronic participation from members of the public.
Thank you, Mr. Morris. Was there anyone else that had any questions or comments? All right, thank you. We will keep you updated. Dr. Dupree and I will be engaging in conversation on a regular basis, as you could expect, to determine what it is that we may need to do to get information to the community and have any board discussion that's necessary for our district to continue its business. So, trustees, please make sure you're paying attention to this. As I say this, we do not currently have any closed session items or a conversation that we were planning on having in closed session. But if there are any trustees that would like to have a conversation in closed session, please speak up and we can do so. I'm hearing none, so we will move on from closed session. Okay, so next we will consider action on closed session items, which we do not have any. Moving along to 7A, which is our board governance. 7A1, consider authorization to continue wage payments to idled employees for the duration of emergency school closures related to the COVID-19 pandemic for a public purpose as set forth in policy DEA local. May I have a motion?
Yes. I move that we authorize to continue the wage payments to idle employees for the duration of emergency school closures related to the COVID-19 pandemic for a public purpose as set forth in our policy DEA local.
We have a motion.
Second.
We have a motion by Mrs. Helliger and a second by Mrs. Tossan. Do we have any discussion?
Yes, this is Jim Rice.
Mr.
And
Rice.
my comment is simply, I would like Charles for you to follow up with Mr. Gwynn and provide us the information about the impact to our fund balance and our budget in general as we move forward.
Yes, sir, we'll do that.
Thank you.
Mrs. Helliger?
I think this is something that we should support. I think this is the right thing for us to do for our community, for our schools, and so I encourage our board members to approve this item.
Thank you, Mrs. Helliger. Please vote by stating yea.
I have a comment.
Okay, I'm sorry,
I have
Mrs.
a
James,
comment. I have a question.
please.
This is Grail James. Dr. Dupree, what percentage of our employees do you expect to be idle? You talked about essential staff working, we talked about child nutrition working, I'm assuming facilities and maintenance people will be cleaning, but do you have any information on what your expectations of percentages are?
So just very rough ballpark, for example, for at least the next week, most teachers, which is roughly 50%, a little bit more of our staff would be idle. Other than that, like you said, most operational staff would be working, including the accounting staff, all the people you can imagine in business and operations, technology, all of those folks would be considered essential staff. So I think initially about 50% as we move toward then the preparation for online learning, that would re-engage almost everybody. So I think most people are going to be earning their pay and ramping up over the next 2 weeks.
Okay, so just so I understand, we'd expect to have about 50% of our people working this coming week, and then after that, a much higher percentage folks actually working to support our online learning, meetings, all those things, programs.
We need somebody to mute their phone, please.
Someone's in the wind.
There we go. Yes, ma'am, that is correct.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. James. Was there anyone else that had a comment or a question?
Yes.
Mr. Rosenthal?
Yes, this is Dave Rosenthal. So, can you just reiterate what you're asking is to authorize the superintendent to pay our employees for as long as we're shut down, right? Or during that period that we're shut down?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? All right, hearing none, please vote by stating yea or nay.
And
Do we have any nays?
Yay.
There you go.
Yay.
Do we have any nays?
I'm a yay.
So am I. So I hear that this motion is passed.
Yay.
Allison? Mrs. Drew?
I did, I was a yay.
Okay. All right, so Mrs. Drew, Mrs. James, Mrs. Tossan, Mr. Rice? Did you? Didn't?
Yes, I voted.
Okay, all right. Okay, thank you. I just wanted to make sure. All right, the motion passed. Moving along to 7A2. Consider delegation of authority to superintendent and/or his designee to approve contracts for goods and services necessary to respond to COVID-19 pandemic with resulting contracts to be reported at next regular board meeting. May I have a motion?
Yes. I move that we delegate authority to the superintendent and his designee to approve contracts for goods and services necessary to respond to the COVID-19 pandemic with resulting contracts to be reported at our next regular meeting.
second,
We have a motion by Mrs. Helliger and a second by Mrs. James. Do we have any discussion? Is there anyone that'd like to make a comment or have a question?
I have a question. This is Mrs. James.
Mrs. James?
Do we have, is there a time on this designation, or a period of time on the designation?
This is, I guess it's similar to what we had with Harvey, where there's not it's open-ended for anything related to COVID-19.
Okay, thank you.
Was there any other questions or comments?
I think it's,
Ms. Heller?
I think it's important to state that as the need arises and any decisions are being made, we have several regularly stated meetings where he would have to report back to us. So even if there's not something, this upcoming meeting, we have meetings scheduled where he would be reported to us on a regular stated basis.
Yes, ma'am, that is correct.
So, Dr. Dupree, we can have regular updates as we do stating what business has been handled in regards to COVID-19.
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right, any other questions or comments? Hearing none, I'm going to go down my list so I make sure that I hear everyone. Mrs. James, please vote by yea or nay.
Yay.
Mr. Rice.
Yay.
Mrs. Tossan.
Yay.
Mrs. Drew.
Yay.
Mr. Rosenthal.
Yay.
Mrs. Helliger.
Yay.
I'm a yea as well. Motion passes. Before we adjourn this meeting, and as we close this meeting, I would like to thank the trustees who made themselves available on such a short notice for this emergency meeting. I echo the support shared by my fellow trustees for Dr. Dupree and his staff who have been closely monitoring this highly fluid situation. I thank them for their sacrifice during the spring break holiday and appreciate their commitment to ensuring the safety of students, staff, and the greater Fort Bend community. I also want to thank the media representatives that are here today for helping us share information with our community as we take measures to address this health crisis. I think it's important for our district to do its part to promote social distancing so that we can slow community spread of the virus. While we are committed to educating our students, our commitment to safety must come first. As we continue our planning, we will be mindful to consider potential inequities that might arise with distance learning solutions and managing expectations generally. As this current situation evolves, we ask that our students, staff, and other members of our community continue to monitor the district website for further information as we will provide regular updates. Again, thank you to everyone who's attended today's meeting. Thank you for your patience as I can't see everyone who's on the line. May I have a motion to adjourn?
I move that we adjourn.
This meeting is now adjourned.